The first time I saw her, everything in my head went quiet. All the tics, all the constantly refreshing images just disappeared.
This is Neil Hilborn. Judging by the almost 13 million views on this video, I'm assuming you've heard of him. He's a really amazing poet that, in my opinion, perfectly encapsulates what contemporary poetry is. It's this words behind a microphone type of poetry. It's not exactly spoken word, but it's this visceral kind of emotional performance. It feels like they're just up there spilling their guts out, but there's still some kind of page. And I'm wondering, does the poem translate the same way? Would the poem be the same on the page? A lot of poets are kind of gaining traction this way. They're uploading videos on YouTube and getting millions of views and performing their poetry rather than just the traditional way of writing it and submitting it to literary magazines and publications. So this is the type of poetry that reaches 13 million people. This is the type of poetry that gets people interested in poetry again. But most of us experience poetry for the first time in our high school English classes, reading Shakespeare or Wordsworth, having our teachers tell us to pore over and dissect every single line to try to figure out what the heck this poet is saying. Because that's what poetry was before today. Dissect each and every line, because each and every line has a meaning. There's a reason why the poet put that word there, right? This is why we obsess over Sylvia Plath's Mad Girl's love song. This is why we dissect the capitalization of Emily Dickinson to find out what they meant. Now, with poetry being spoken in front of a camera or behind a microphone, we don't have the ability to dissect every single word, do we? That's what interests me in these words behind microphone type of poets who come out with their own poetry books. I am so eager to get my hands on those because I want to see if the poetry on the page is the same as the poetry behind the microphone. So when I found Neil Hilborn's Our Numbered Days, I was so excited to get my hands on this and to read the same poem that captivated 13 million people. So it was the conclusion. Is the poem the same on the page, or do you really need to have them perform it to you to understand why it's so amazing? And this makes me want to talk about free verse and line breaks. So what is free verse poetry? A lot of times when you think about poetry, you think of the nursery rhymes that we were told as kids. You think of Shakespeare's sonnets. You think of rhyme schemes and those types of things. Well, free verse is the type of poetry that doesn't really have any of that. Free verse doesn't have a specified form. It doesn't have a specified rhyme scheme. Any words can be thrown on the page in any order, and that is free verse. After the second half of the 19th century, free verse kind of revolutionized poetry. I mean, you got Whitman out here, you got Dickinson out here. They're just going willy-nilly, throwing all sorts of words on the pages, and people are like, how is this poetry? Scholars were like, how is this poetry? But everyday people, they were eating that shit up. They loved it because they could understand it. They didn't have to have a bachelor's degree in poetry to understand what Walt Whitman was trying to say. That's kind of like what's happening now, right? Like, it's a revolutionized form of free verse almost. You don't need to understand poetry to get what Neil Hilborn is saying when you see this video, right? But the great thing about poets like this is even if you do take the time to break down the page, it still makes sense. So when you think about line breaks, people oftentimes think about what happens at the end of a thought or at the end of a rhyme. You know, that's when the line break comes in. You think of Shakespeare's, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks? Line break. It is the East, and Juliet is the sun line break. But when you get into poetry like free verse poetry, the lines get messy. Because like I said, the words could be anywhere on the page, right? Neil Hilborn uses this to his advantage on the page. When we specifically think about O.C.D., one of the biggest parts of that poem that sticks out to us is his repetition. When he's up there and he's repeating things over and over again, it's almost like the poem wasn't constructed this way. This is just his natural OCD tics coming out, right? When you look on the page, you see that too. Did I lock the door? Yes. Did I wash my hands? Yes. Did I lock the door? Yes. Did I wash my hands? Yes. The way you see these line breaks play and the lack of punctuation there speeds it up for you. There's no punctuation in these lines, right? So when you just read the first line, you read it all the way through. And the breaks, they begin so uniformly, but then it slowly kind of dissolves into madness when we look to the end of the poem when he's repeating over.
I want to wake up every morning thinking about the way she holds her steering wheel, how she turns shower knobs like she's opening a safe, how she blows out candles, 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 blows out.
On the page, these words beg us to spill over into the next line. This is called enjambment. This is when the line breaks in the middle of a thought. Look on the page and see how Neil Hilborn takes this enjambment and rushes us along with the anxiety that he's feeling at the time. Blows out the candles, blows out the candles, blows out the candles, blows out candles, blows out. The line breaks are messy. The line breaks aren't as uniform as they were at the beginning of the poem. Did I lock the door? Yes. Did I wash my hands? Yes. Now they're messy, which is exactly what Neil Hilborn wants us to feel about these lines, right? They're spilling into each other. You can't tell really when he's going to end the line next because he can't tell when things are going to end. Even if we were to pause at the end of each line, we'd still be lost in this sea of repetition, this chaos that Neil Hilborn is lost in himself as he's dealing with his OCD and this heartbreak. This specific use of line breaks and enjambment makes this poem come alive in the same way that watching him perform it on a stage does. This is what draws us to the poem. These types of poems that Neil Hilborn writes and performs so beautifully, they act as their own screenplay and director. Reading the poem on the page, having never seen this video, you still feel what Neil Hilborn is trying to make you feel. You still ache with Hilborn. So by the time he reaches the end, it's all the more powerful. Just as by the time you reach the end of the poem on the page, those last two lines still stop your heart.
Now, I just think about who else is kissing her. I can't breathe because he only kisses her once. He doesn't care if it's perfect. I want her back so bad. I leave the door unlocked. I leave the lights on.
Thanks for watching my first YouTube video. I'm Sarah and I love to talk about poetry. So if you have any poets or poems that you want me to talk about, leave them in the comments down below. If you liked this video, maybe give it a like and maybe subscribe. I'm going to try to post these types of videos maybe once every week, every 2 weeks. I'm not quite sure yet. Trying to get the hang of it. So I don't really know how to end videos, so bye! Hello. Hi. I'm trying to record a video. Mwah!